Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Adrienne Pomeroy, and I am the Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator in the Department of Racial and Social Justice with the City of Somerville. I am also the staff liaison to the Somerville Commission for Persons with Disabilities. The Department of Racial and Social Justice leads the City of Somerville's equity efforts and collaborates with city departments, constituents, and stakeholders to eliminate the institutional and structural systems that create racial inequities, social disparities, and injustices. Due to some technical difficulties on my end, I am off camera this evening, but you all should be able to hear me, but I'm not going to be talking that much, so that doesn't matter. The education portion of this webinar is being recorded, but we will be editing out the Q&A portion before publishing to the city's website or sharing out for privacy reasons. The department is happy to support SCPD Commissioner Michael Shaps and the SCPD in bringing you all this important workshop. So I will pass it on to Commissioner Shaps.
Hi, Somerville. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is M. Michael Shaps. I serve as a commissioner on the Somerville Commission for Persons with Disabilities. The Somerville Commission for Persons with Disabilities is committed to protecting the rights of people with disabilities and helping to make Somerville a city where everyone belongs. We work to break down barriers, physical, systemic, and attitudinal, so that every resident, worker, and visitor has equal access to Somerville's programs and opportunities. Our goal is to make sure no one is left out or left behind. We believe that people with disabilities have valuable contributions to make, and we're happy to be here to help ensure that they have a fair chance to do so. As for me, my work on the commission is geared toward mental health. I'm a retired school psychologist, an author, a YouTuber, and a lifelong advocate for disability rights. But beyond all of those titles, I'm also a person living with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. My journey with trauma began when I was just 10 years old. It continued for decades, and it shaped who I am. Not just the pain I've lived through, but the healing I've worked for and the strength I've built from that process. I'm speaking here not as a professional, but as a survivor. For many years, I carried the weight of my mental health in silence, not because I wanted to, but because it didn't feel safe to speak. I know how isolating it can feel when you think you're the only one struggling. That's why I initiated this workshop, to make talking about mental health more common, more human, and yes, more vulnerable. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and that's just not about diagnoses. Mental health exists on a spectrum. It can be anything from the anxiety we feel before giving a talk, going on a date, or showing up in new spaces, to the deep and ongoing challenges of mental illness. No matter where you are on that spectrum, your experience matters, and it deserves to be met with compassion and understanding. My hope for today is that we create a space where it's okay not to be okay, where individuals, families, and communities can begin to talk more openly, without shame, about what we're going through, because the more we talk, the less power our struggles have to isolate and define us. Before I introduce our speaker, a few announcements. If we have time, there will be the Q&A session, which will be edited out. Please put your questions in the Q&A section. There will also be a 5-minute intermission in the middle. It's now my honor to introduce someone who embodies this spirit of healing and connection, Dr. Christopher Willard. Dr. Willard is a clinical psychologist, consultant, and author based here in Massachusetts. He has shared his insights on mental health across 40 countries, spoken on the TEDx stage, and written 20 books, including Alpha Breaths, Growing Up Mindful, How We Grow Through What We Go Through, and his newest, with a title I absolutely love, Feelings Are Like Farts. His work has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and more. And he teaches at Harvard Medical School. Today, he's here to help us heal together, to help make the language of mental health as natural as any other topic, and to learn mindfulness tools that not only manage stress, but bring calm, present, and resilience into our everyday lives. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Willard.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Adrian. We've been talking about this for a while, and it's always, I feel like whenever I do a talk and it goes really smoothly, it's a sign that people behind the scenes are working very, very hard to pull it off. So I know Michael, who I know as Michael, not Commissioner Michael, congratulations. And as a friend of mine, it's wonderful to be here. So thank you both for the very hard work and everybody else behind the scenes. And thank you everyone who came tonight. We were kind of joking beforehand. It's a beautiful sunny evening in May. A lot of us have family, a lot of us have people that we're caring for. And the competition tonight is a beautiful spring evening in the greater Somerville area. So I just want to spend some time sharing about mindfulness, sharing about how this is helpful for us, as well as why it's helpful for kids and those who we might be caring for, because we are just so stressed out. Those of us who are carrying mental health challenges, those of us who are caring for people with mental health challenges. In fact, we know that caregiver burnout is one of the biggest predictors of its own mental health issues and depression and other kinds of struggles and stress. So we'll spend some time talking about that and what we can do. It can feel so incredibly isolating for so many people who feel like they're the only one with mental health issues, or who feel like they're the only one living with mental health issues, someone with mental health issues, or caring for someone who's struggling with mental health issues. It's so isolating to be, and I'm a therapist, but working with families where you feel like you're the only one whose kid is struggling, or you're the only one who's not sure if you can bring a family member to a party, or that you can even go out because you have to stay home and do caregiving, or you're uncertain of whether your own anxiety and struggles will let you out of the house and live as full a life as you want to be able to live. Which is why I'm just, hearing the introductions too, I'm just so struck by my gratitude that we live in a part of the country and a part of the world where people care about this, where there are commissioners, where there are people in the city dedicated to supporting folks who might be struggling in whatever way they might be struggling. So I'm grateful to be living here. I'm grateful to be invited to offer what support I can to all of you out there. So I thought I'd open with a brief mindfulness practice, and then we'll talk about what mindfulness is and do some practices, and we'll turn a bit towards some of the science of mindfulness, and then some practices for young people that we can adapt in different ways. But let's just take a moment on this beautiful night, and if you like, you can just sit upright. And if you feel comfortable, you can allow your eyes to close, but that's really at your comfort level. And especially folks who've had challenges in their lives may not feel comfortable or safe closing their eyes. So that's not mandatory by any means. You can just raise your shoulders and then just let them drop. And then finding a posture that's comfortable, that feels upright. Imagining yourself strong and solid, sitting upright like a mountain. And your mind might wander, especially at this point in the evening. You can just bring it back to this image or the sensations of your body, just tall and strong like a mountain. Just like a mountain, you don't have to let anything move you. You can just remain confident, strong, solid. And the next time your mind wanders off, this time just bring it to your breath and just enjoying your breath, feeling your breath. And you can almost imagine the sounds and sensations of the rise and fall of your breath, like waves in the ocean on a beautiful summer day on the Cape or the North Shore. Noticing how each breath, just like waves, is a bit different than the one before. Some breaths, like some waves, are longer, and some breaths, like some waves, are a bit shorter. Some are smooth and others are rough. But just like waves in the ocean, your breath just keeps coming, one after the next, after the next. And then lifting your awareness up toward your mind and just seeing your mind like the sky. And just like the sky, your mind can be vast, infinite, accepting of whatever drifts through. Thoughts, emotions might drift through like clouds, but your mind is always there, just watching, accepting. And lastly, just bringing your awareness down to your heart and just feeling your heart shining like the sun. Just radiating warmth, kindness, patience outward. And then you can just raise your eyes and take a look around. Look around the room, just noticing where you are, Somerville, or the area on this beautiful Wednesday evening in May in the springtime. So welcome back. And you might also notice if you feel a bit different after a practice like that. You might feel like, oh, I don't feel anything, or oh, I wasn't very good at that. And those are all normal responses. And that's actually the longest kind of exercise we're gonna do this evening to explore mindfulness. And also just want to share shorter kinds of practices. But to me, I think visualizations can be really helpful for a lot of us. And again, to feel the rhythm of our breath, like the waves in the ocean, if that's a positive association, or feel our heart shining like the sun, or feel our body. Many of us have felt disempowered in our body, but feeling solid and strong, confident, like a mountain, can be itself really empowering. And the visual also helps us to focus rather than just, oh, just go focus on your breath, which a lot of us think of when we think of mindfulness. And I want to start there because a lot of us, might think mindfulness is this thing that requires, like, I have to go off to a mountaintop, or I have to go, sit on a meditation cushion for hours on end and focus on my breath. And that's great if you want to do that. I highly recommend, in fact, that you do those things, but you don't have to. And I've got this interest in sharing mindfulness, in particular with kids, with young people, and helping parents and caregivers to practice mindfulness to manage their own stresses. And I think back to when I was a kid, I never heard the word mindfulness, but I experienced mindfulness in these ways that we didn't call mindfulness back then. And I bet you did too. And so I think about, I grew up in the area when I was a kid. I remember going to Drumlin Farm Camp out in Lincoln. And remember the counselors at the camp would say, we're going to go walk in the woods. Can you walk like as silently as you can? And, this was, kind of this fun activity. And then many years later, I took a mindfulness course when I was struggling with my own stress and mental health issues. I'll get into that in a moment. And we did mindful walking in a mindfulness class. And in mindful walking, the instructions are just focus on each footstep and, notice the sensations of the ground and don't think about the past or the future and all of that stuff. And I thought back to being a kid when they said, why don't you walk as silently as you can, walk like a ninja or something in the forest? Because if you've ever tried to walk silently, you're focused on each footstep. You're not thinking about the past. You're not thinking about the future. You just notice the sensation in each muscle, right? You're noticing the texture of the ground underneath you. And so it's actually kind of mindful walking. We just didn't call it mindful walking. We'd sit down in the woods and the counselors would say, we're going to notice all the sounds. In fact, let's take a moment wherever you're sitting. What are the sounds? Can you hear the birds outside? I can hear the bus going by on Concord Avenue. I can hear the fan in the other room, right? When I was a kid sitting in the woods, they'd say, sit like a deer, listen like a rabbit. We thought we're not going to hear anything. And then sure enough, right, we're hearing the sounds of the wind in the trees or hearing, the river rushing past. And I did a mindful listening activity when I was older, again in that mindfulness course. And it was like, oh yeah, that's just like what we did as kids, trying to listen like deer. And now that I'm 47 years old, I realized probably the camp counselors were actually trying to get us to shut up. And that might be the case. And it worked, but also it did actually get us into the moment and had this powerful experience of mindfulness and a really sweet memory. Or being with my dad, just watching clouds like appear and disappear in the sky. He even said to me, he said, if you pick a cloud and you breathe, you can actually make the cloud disappear, like with your mind. Right? So these kinds of things were like mindfulness before I heard the word mindfulness. And then at some point along the way, I had some of my own difficulties and challenges. And I was in college and was actually really struggling with mental health, with depression, with anxiety. I had a very bad substance abuse problem. And I took some time off from college and I didn't know what to do with myself. And I kind of sat around, and my parents actually eventually dragged me on this meditation retreat with someone named Thich Nhat Hanh, this amazing meditation teacher. And suddenly things transformed for me. We walked mindfully, we ate mindfully, we spoke mindfully. And what started to happen was I felt happier, I felt more creative. My depression got better, my anxiety got better. It didn't fix anything in my life, but I felt like I was more able to handle some of these things. I got sober. I've been sober for 24 years now, right? I mean, it's these amazing things started to happen when I actually was able to practice mindfulness. I don't want to sit here and promise that mindfulness is going to fix everything, and it didn't fix everything in my life, but it really got me started on this really interesting pathway of healing for myself, and then working as a teacher, helping kids who were struggling with mental health issues, and then working as a therapist, and now being a parent to two kids, which is, I feel so grateful for. So what I want to talk about is, what is mindfulness, why this is important for us, sharing this with our kids. But I want to start by just saying I get asked all the time, how do we, create more mindful kids, especially if we're caregivers, and realizing, if you want more mindful kids, what you have to do is actually surround them with more mindful adults. And if you want stressed out kids, you just surround them with stressed out adults. But if you want the opposite of that, right, you have to surround kids with more mindful, compassionate adults. So what starts to happen is that mindfulness is actually really contagious. Our moods are contagious. Anxiety is incredibly contagious. Stress is contagious, right? A lot of us, we get home and we don't realize it, but we're bringing more stress home from work. Or maybe we're at home and we hear the car pull up, or, remembering from our own childhood, hearing the lock in the door, or, someone, opening the door, and we start to get more anxious because, what's mom or dad, or what's, this person or that person bringing in, right? They're maybe bringing in some stress or some anger, and that's going to spread to the rest of us at home. But the opposite is also true, right? We can bring calm in to the workplace. We can bring calm in to our families, to our partners, to our roommates, to whoever it is in our lives. And it's really powerful how this happens. Parents who practice mindfulness, better communication, more happiness in the home, educators who do a lot of work with schools, the kids are doing better in school, people living together are happier, right? Couples, when one person's practicing mindfulness, communication is better. All these kinds of amazing things start to happen when just one person in the home is practicing mindfulness. So it's really very powerful. And I think about this dad who I worked with. Actually, he's back in therapy. I don't know whether that makes me a good therapist that he wants to come back or a bad therapist that didn't fix him. But I worked with him for a long time ago, and then he came back, and we worked together for a few years. And when we finished at that time, I said, what was the most helpful thing we did? He said, well, Chris, we did all this therapy for 3 years, and and the most helpful thing you taught me was, I got this high stress job and I drive home on the highway, kind of honking at everybody on 95 and, grinding through traffic. And I pull into my driveway and I just stop in my driveway and just lean back and just take 3 breaths in the driveway, car off, just feeling my back and legs against the seat. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. Then I walk into the house. And I'm not always bringing a lot of calm, but at least I'm not bringing more chaos when I walk into the house. Because I used to just bring more chaos, and the nanny would be running out the door, and my wife would be about to lose her mind, and my kids would be screaming, and and he had this very special need. He still has this very special needs kid who's now a special needs teenager, right? But that he can come in with some calm and not just make things even more chaotic, and sometimes even just with his presence calm them down. So the way that we are actually really impacts our kids. I saw this a few years ago. It says, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down, right? I tried it when I was a teacher. If I was a therapist and I told people to calm down, I'd be like the best anxiety therapist ever, right? If just telling someone to do that worked, miracle worker, 1 session, go see Dr. Willard, never be worked up again, right? As a parent, right? Usually my daughter just gets even more amped up if I suggest that she calm down or take a breath, by the way. We'll talk about that. But the fact is, our kids or the people in our lives, our partners, the people that we care about and care for, they don't calm down unless they feel safe enough to calm down. And people don't feel safe enough to calm down until the cues in their environment tell them that they're safe, or the people in their life show them that they are safe people to calm down and connect with. So we know the term triggers, right? I felt triggered, my anxiety was triggered, my craving was triggered, my trauma was triggered. I have a friend who talks about glimmers are the opposite of triggers. My friend Deb Dana, she says, glimmers are like what reminds you that you're calm, what reminds you that you're safe, right? When you walk in the door of a school, or you walk in the door of your home, it's the rituals that you do. It's the people who welcome you, who get down to your level. If a kid's having a hard time, who speak in a kind, compassionate voice, inviting you in, not saying take a breath, but saying, oh, why don't we take a couple breaths? Why don't we take a moment to listen to sounds or feel our feet on the ground? Right? That's what I need right now. Do you want to do that with me? That's so different, right? And then everyone feels safe enough to calm down, or what we call co-regulate is the kind of fancy language for that. And co-regulation is that idea of like, and we all know probably the cliche of, put on your own oxygen mask first before the person next to you. And you do have to breathe that oxygen and learn how to breathe. And we'll get into that, right? But that really does make a difference. The other thing I heard a wonderful therapist named Lori Gottlieb say once was, it's like you're on the airplane and you're kind of flying along, and then there's, the plane starts to shake, and everyone's like, did the engine fall off? What's going on? Right. And then the pilot gets on and she says something like, ding, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence. Right? We're going to get you to the destination safely. Don't move around the cabin. Just, keep your seatbelts fastened. And if the pilot is calm, then the passengers can be calm. right? If the pilot's anxious, whoa, it's turbulence, right? Then everyone on the plane, oh my gosh, what kind of turbulence are we gonna do? But if the pilot's calm, not everyone calms down, but everyone has the opportunity, right? It creates the conditions under which people calm down and go back to doing their Wordle or Candy Crush or whatever it is that they're doing on the airplane. And so what that does then, of course, what I'm saying here is that you're the pilot, right, of your home. You're the pilot of your workplace. You're the pilot of your family, right, of your community, of your family of choice, right? All of these kinds of things in your life. And so when you're able to be calm and present, right, you become a calming presence, as another friend of mine likes to say. So the more we kind of are able to regulate ourselves, the bigger an impact that has on the people around us. And so I've been talking about why mindfulness is great. I haven't even said what it is. And so I do want to now say what mindfulness is. All the definitions that are out there seem to have these three elements. Okay, there's something about paying attention. And all of us have probably been told to pay attention. We all probably tell the people in our lives to pay attention, our partners, our kids, our dogs, right? Whoever it is, right? But so few of us have ever actually been taught like how to pay attention. And so we'll talk about how to actually train our attention. And we'll talk about the here and now and kindness and curiosity as we go too. But this first thing about paying attention. Now, what happens is that we all are very busy. And we all start doing what we think is multitasking, and we think we're getting more done in less time, but actually we're getting less done in more time. Multitasking actually exhausts our brain, or tempting to, and it makes us actually in a worse mood, more stressed out. And actually researchers looked, can anyone actually multitask? And they found that 1/2 of 1% of the population can multitask. The rest of us just think we can. And by the way, that 1/2 of 1% is pretty much entirely women, which isn't all that surprising to me. But I'd like you to do this little single tasking, I call it, practice with me, which is a great way of just kind of training our attention and settling down. Just take a moment and put a finger in the center of your forehead like this. Even just a hand, put your head in your hands, which is maybe how you feel at the end of the day. But just noticing, what does your finger or your hand feel like against your forehead? And what does your forehead feel like against your finger? What's the temperature of your finger? What's the temperature of your forehead? Moisture on your forehead or moisture on your finger? Mind to wander off, just bring it back, noticing the texture of your skin on your forehead, texture of the skin on your finger. And you can just set your hand back down again, and maybe just taking a look around the room a little bit, or even out the window as it gets a little bit darker. And coming back, but noticing that even in 40 seconds of just focusing on sensations, things start to settle down a little bit. Our nervous system quiets down, our brain quiets down just a little bit. There's no off switch, sorry. There's a little bit of a dial to turn down the stress, but no off switch. Right? But this kind of thing can help as we slow down and just really do one thing at a time. Actually, I have a friend in Finland who's going to do a day of mindfulness. He just called it "Do One Thing at a Time Day," which I thought was kind of awesome. So single tasking, right? Learning how to manage our attention, right? And then being in the present moment, which is kind of like, okay, what does that mean? Because I've got stuff I need to do, right? I've got to pick up the kids. I've got to, call 15 pharmacies to see who's got the ADHD medication for my son. I've got to go to my own job. Oh, shoot, I forgot to eat, right? Oh, I got this presentation tonight. How am I going to get there in time? We've got so many things going on. It's very hard to not think about the future, not think about the past. And what happens is, right, the future, we're often kind of, telling ourselves horror stories, right? I'm not I'm not going to pick up my son on time. There's not going to be any medication, right? Then everything's going to go terribly, right? My son's going to have an incredibly hard time. He's going to, have an issue at school and get kicked out of school, and then he's never going to get a job. He's going to live in my basement for the rest of my. Okay, come back to the present. I'm going to make a note, call the pharmacy, right? Got the list of pharmacies from last time, right? I gotta just stink some radical acceptance, but I just got to call 10 pharmacies, see who's got the medication. Others of us, right? Maybe we're stuck in the past, not the present. Why did my kid do that? Why did I do that? Why did that person do that? Why did that happen to me, right? This is my fault. I'm such a terrible person, right? Usually we blame ourselves for things that happened in the past, and that doesn't go too well. But researchers actually found that being in the present can make us happier. That actually what you're doing isn't what makes you happy. It's how focused you are on doing it. These researchers at Harvard actually would text people on their phones and ask what they were doing, right? So learning to get in the present moment is really helpful, but it's hard. You can hear my kids getting home. It's hard to get in the present moment. One of the best ways we can get into the present is with our five senses. Like actually, if you ask people, kind of Family Feud style, right, where do you feel at your best? Most people actually say the shower, right? Most relaxed, feel my best in the shower. I actually think it's because the shower is so sensory, like our five senses bring us into the present. You hear the sound of the shower, you see the steam rising, you smell the soap, you hear the sounds, right? You feel your body getting warm, you see the suds, you see the steam, right? And you also don't have your phone in the shower, hopefully, right? But we feel good, it's our senses. And so this is actually a way, getting in touch with our senses, that we can get a little bit more into the moment, so that when we're showering, we're just showering. When we're washing our dishes, we're just washing our dishes. When we're walking, we're just walking, eating, just noticing with all five of our senses what it's like to eat, to taste the food, smell the food, all of it. Or just taking little moments to check in with maybe one of our senses. I mentioned at the beginning being at Drumlin Farm Camp and noticing sounds. I still love to do that as an adult because you know what? Breathing is boring. My son actually told me breathing is boring. He said, I'm never breathing again. And he came in, he's breathing. It's good, right? But breathing is boring. But I love just listening to sounds. And so let's actually take a moment and try that right now. You can close or lower your eyes if it's comfortable. You can just notice maybe the farthest away sound that you can hear. And then coming a little bit closer, noticing sounds inside the house, inside the building. And then noticing sounds inside the room, maybe the fan, or maybe the creaking of the chair, or your own breath. And even noticing sounds inside your body. Can you hear your heartbeat, blood rushing past your ears? And then shifting back out again, noticing sounds from the left or sounds from the right. In front of you or behind you. Even above or below. And then you can just raise your eyes again. And once more, just taking a look around. I'm curious, what was that sound that you heard? So these are a way to get into the moment. And when we're struggling to get into the moment, we can just ground ourselves. Or when a kid, right, maybe mind is wandering in school or when they're supposed to be sitting doing their homework, right? They're already thinking, oh, what's that sound? Oh, there's a plane going by. Where's the plane going? Is it going north or south, right? I wonder if it's going to Florida. I went on a plane once. I think it's JetBlue, right? Okay, just notice the sound and then come a little bit closer. Sounds inside, a little bit closer, right? Sounds in the room, sounds in our body. Right? It's actually teaching kids how to pay attention, how to get into the moment and focus. It's like zooming in. Or, when I was like kid, I was like, out, I was not much of an athlete, but, maybe out playing sports or something, right in the outfield, my mind is all over the place, but just get my head into the game, just notice sounds from the left, the right, in front, behind, right? Pretty quickly, I'm a little bit more into the moment. So our senses, and of course, we can also explore taste and smell and touch and all these other things that can be really grounding and helpful too. Another thing to remind ourselves actually is just feeling our feet on the ground. We can feel so ungrounded. Those of us that have experienced trauma, those of us that have experienced anxiety, those of us that are feeling just overwhelmed or feeling nervous about public speaking even. And I had a friend tell me once, Chris, if you're anxious with public speaking, that anxiety is up in your head, right? I'm like, yeah. Like, well, just what's the farthest place from your head? And I said, well, my feet. She said, well, just take a breath in. You can do this with me. Just bring your attention down to your feet and just press your feet into the ground. Remind yourself, I am where my feet are. Is the ground hard or soft? Are your feet warm or cool? Are they dry or damp? Are your shoes tight or loose? And then just one more time, press your feet into the ground and raise your eyes again. So another simple way to ground ourselves is by using the ground in a conflict, in an argument, at a difficult moment in the day, to just take a little moment to do something like that. And then lastly, we have this thing about non-judgment and acceptance. And then maybe we'll take a brief break. But this seems really abstract also. And to me, a lot of what it means is this idea of don't believe everything you think. Like, we all have that critical voice, like, what's the matter with you? Right? Why'd you let that happen? Why did you do that? Why didn't you do this? Why did you get that? And our kids have that, right? Why did I say that thing? Why did I do that thing? Why did I give the answer on that test? Why can't I do this? We all have that critical voice. And what's been amazing to me in my own life with mindfulness is, like, this bumper sticker says, don't believe everything you think, right? Just because I'm having the thought doesn't mean that it's true. That was like earth shattering for me to have that realization, right? Oh my gosh, I don't have to believe all my thoughts. Right? And one thing I like to use with kids or adults is I've got this, you can use a snow globe, but right here I've just got a little jar with some glitter in it. We have like 80,000 thoughts a day. So I have to pick out 80,000 pieces of glitter for the jar. Just kidding. But it starts out, the glitter is like our thoughts. Our day starts out pretty clear, and then different things happen, right? I'm running late to drop off the kids, right? I'm calling 20 pharmacies. The kids are arguing. My spouse or my ex is angry with me, right? I'm starting to feel panicky. Oh my gosh, right? I've got some health issues, and pretty soon thoughts and feelings are swirling around all over the place. So what can I do to be able to see clearly again? The only thing I can really do is just stop, become still. And eventually I haven't gotten rid of my thoughts and feelings, but they just started to settle a little bit. And I can see a bit more clearly. This helps me decide, do I believe that thought or not? Right? That thought seems helpful. That one, maybe not so helpful. But that's something that we can also do. Other things that we can think about for ourselves or for our kids is we all have these negative thoughts, stinking thinking, call them cognitive distortions is kind of the fancy way of putting it in psychological language. But we all have these thoughts, like we say it or we hear our kids say it, right? I can't make friends, right? I can't get my kid to settle down, right? I can't find medication at the pharmacy. Maybe I'm telling you a little bit of what I'm dealing with lately. Um, and when we say that, or we hear our kids say that, we can actually play with that a little bit. And we can remind ourselves or remind them or whoever we're caring for, right? I'm having the thought that I can't make friends. I'm having the thought that I'll never get the medication. I'm having the thought that right, my parents are really sick and I won't be able to care for them. Right? And that actually helps us to not believe all those thoughts. Or we can also say the word yet. Right? I can't make friends yet. I can't find the medication at a pharmacy yet. Right? I can't manage my temper yet. I can't figure out how to manage the paperwork for my sick parents yet. And what that actually does is it opens up room for possibility. We call this growth mindset rather than fixed mindset, which is really empowering and actually changes how we interact with the world. We feel much less helpless when we shift into that growth mindset. So mindfulness, in a sense, is all of these. And we try to put it together with something like paying attention to the here and now with acceptance and non-judgment, or kindness and curiosity. And yet we know this is hard. And I also really believe in my heart that, like, to me, mindfulness, it's, I can put words around it, but sometimes it's just like, sitting in the woods listening to sounds is maybe a better definition for me, or something like a picture, right? Picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And you might notice, some differences between these two. So let's take a little pause right here, take about 5 minutes or so. We'll come back and I'll share a few more thoughts about adapting mindfulness for young people and ways that we can practice as a family or as caregivers with kids and teens. So 5 minutes, we'll come back at like 7:18, and I'll see you then. All right, we'll get started in another minute. Thank you for hanging out, and we'll try to allow a little time for questions. I always bring more than I am ever able to get to, but we can all stay in touch. If you have questions, feel free to just email me, chris@drchristopherwillard.com, or you can find me on Instagram or those various places. And of course, I'm in Cambridge, right over the line. But moving forward, I often like this slide, mindful or mindful. My daughter was in here, she's learning to read. She was trying to sound that out actually while we were on the break. Right, but you might notice the human, of course, has all this stuff on their minds, doesn't even see the sunshine in the trees, right? The dog sees just the sunshine in the trees. Right? And the reality is we're human beings, we're not dogs, right? We have to think about the past and think about the future, right? We have to plan the traffic and all this other stuff that's in the picture. Socks, I don't know what those are doing there, but right, this is the reality. But we get stuck like this, right? Friday afternoon, we're out walking the dog, and instead of just enjoying it, we're already thinking like, oh my gosh, 63 hours till I have to be back at the office, or oh my gosh, what's going to await me when I walk in the door? And so how do we be in the moment when it's helpful to be in the moment, right? And the other thing that happens is, I had a teenager say to me, Chris, it's like if the human being is thinking about all that stuff, mindfulness isn't just like sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. If they're thinking about all that stuff, they're about to step in the dog shit. And I was like, you know what, you're actually right. Like mindfulness is noticing the beauty in the world, but also where the real dangers are. But when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're depressed, when we're struggling with trauma, our ability to discern safety and danger gets distorted sometimes. And so stress really has this profound impact. That's odd. Those are not the slides I expected to be there. Stress really has this profound impact on us. And there we go. And so I'd like to do a little demonstration of stress. You can start by just holding your hands out like this and just squeezing your fists really tightly and noticing what happens to your breath, your body, and also what happens to your mind, feeling open or closed. And then just kind of let go, and you can just kind of collapse over in your seat like this, which is probably how you feel at 7:30 on Wednesday. And again, noticing your breath, your body, your mind, feeling awake or asleep. And then just sitting upright, not too tight, not too loose. Notice what this is like, feeling open or closed, awake or asleep. And then just take a moment and put one hand on the other and rest them both over your heart. How's your body and your mind now? You can just put your hands back down. And what I'm having us do is actually simulate some different ways that we respond to stress, all of us, adults, kids, everyone. And that includes all kinds of stress, right? But what academic stress, social stress, athletic stress, racial stress, marginalization stress, stress of, trying to get our medication, trying to get our kids' medication, trying to call the doctor, right? And our stress system evolved to keep us safe from physical threats, like a saber-toothed tiger chasing us. And the reality is there's not a lot of saber-toothed tigers chasing us these days, but we still go into the same responses. If there's a tiger chasing you, what do? You maybe want to flee and run away, the flight response, you run away, great. Then it catches up to you, you want to fight, right? So we have the fight or flight response. Then we start to get tired. And so we just kind of like freeze, play dead, or kind of try to become camouflaged, right? Maybe to say forget it, or different F word besides forget it in there that might be helpful. And so we have fight or flight like this, and we have, freeze and faint, forget it like this. And over time, those actually become some of the mental health challenges based on a traumatic experience or on chronic stress that we're under. Fight becomes, we get really reactive. our kids, the people around us, get really reactive. Everything looks like a threat, right? When we're under stress. Or we flee, we run away, we avoid things. That actually just creates more anxiety. The more we avoid, the more anxiety we end up with. Or we just kind of freeze in a kind of dissociative kind of way, right, from trauma, or just kind of, kind of say, just forget it, kind of giving up, right, becoming isolated, depressed, maybe turning to addictions. And this is how stress and trauma actually contributes to mental health and behavioral challenges. What else happens is when we're feeling this stress, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala that turns on. It's like the brain's alarm system. But when that alarm is on, the blood is going there and it's not going to the thinking things through part of the brain up front in the prefrontal cortex, or the understanding other people, empathy part of the brain on the sides, where we understand people's emotions. And so we end up acting more impulsively, right? We end up not thinking things through. Our critical thinking shuts down. Everyone looks like a threat. And also our breath gets short and shallow, right? Other things start to change in our body. We actually crave different foods. If we're going to fight or flee, we're craving sugar and fat and salts to get energy. We're not craving kale. I mean, we're never craving kale. Although sweet green is pretty good, but we really are, just kind of, this is why we stress eat, right? Because when we're stressed, we think I just gonna need that survival energy food. Right? Even when we're in kind of freeze and faint, our breath and our heartbeat are slower, but they're still dysregulated. The good news is we have these other responses, attend and befriend, which really do the opposite. We can also call these mindfulness and compassion, but the front part of the brain activates, we think things through. The sides activate, we have empathy and emotional intelligence. We can see the big picture, right? The breath becomes regular and even, the heart rate slows down, right? Muscles start to relax. And so what we can do is actually then, it's not like fight or flight is always bad, attend to befriend is good. These are useful in different situations. I think about, if you're in a dangerous situation, of course you want to fight, of course you want to flee. Some of us walk through dangerous neighborhoods or go into dangerous situations. Of course, we're going to be more what we call hyper vigilant, like ready to go into fight or flight. But learning how to turn that response off, or at least turn the volume down on it, is really important to teach ourselves and teach kids, so that when we are safe, we're not still in fight or flight. When we are safe, we can really enjoy being with the people who are safe to us and get all the benefits of those relationships. And so you probably noticed that when we were like this, your breath was really, but actually when we regulate our breath, we can regulate our body. That regulates our nervous system and our brain, and that actually regulates our attention, our impulses, and our emotions. So slowing the breath down to about 5 or 6 breaths in a minute actually really shuts off that alarm system in the brain. So we have to breathe deeply and slowly. I like to say it's like there's a reset button in the bottom of your lungs. You have to breathe deeply and slowly to hit that. Just like when you call Comcast, you say, my internet's not working. They always say, restart your computer. And then that works a lot of the time. Well, our nervous system reset button is in the bottom of our lungs. Slowly and deeply is how we need to breathe. And so with little kids, we can make it fun. I wrote a book with a friend a few years ago called Alpha Breaths, and it's things like A is for the alligator breath. You can breathe in and breathing back out, breathing in and back out. Or B is for the butterfly breath. My daughter calls it the rainbow unicorn princess mermaid fairy butterfly breath. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. And we're slowing our breath down to that like 5 or 6 breaths in a minute range. Hot chocolate breath. You can imagine you've got a cup or a mug of hot chocolate. You can breathe in smelling and blow out, cooling it off. It could also be pizza, or I was doing a talk today for people in China. It could be a bowl of noodles, breathe in, smelling. Blow out, cooling off. So again, we're just learning how to regulate our breath. Of course, kids get older, they're not going to do butterfly breaths, but maybe it is some other things that we do without realizing it that are self-regulating. If you ever go like this, it's very hard to not breathe deeply and not breathe slowly. If you just lean back, hands behind your head like this, maybe every couple of questions on a test or you're feeling worked up, take a moment and lean back like this. Another thing we do without realizing it that lets out stress is just sighing, just a long exhale, like, ah. Maybe if you live with teenagers or work with them or know teenagers, you experience them sighing at you. They're like, oh, you're so annoying, right? So I'll say to any of us, kids and adults alike, you don't want to get in trouble for sighing at someone, but if you're frustrated or overwhelmed, you can just take a breath in and then just letting out a nice long silent sigh. Just pressing all the air out down to the bottom of your breath. And then letting your breath reset itself. So breathing, right? Finding those little moments in the middle of the game that you're playing with the kids when you're stuck, at that, what's that horrible intersection, sort of like up by the like on the way to Market Basket, and like you're trying to take a Mossland, is that up by the car wash, like worst intersection ever, right? You're just so frustrated. It's like, okay, well, maybe I'll just take a few breaths while I'm here waiting for the light, blowing bubbles, right? So it's finding these moments before you get on stage, before you walk in the door, as we've talked about before. For kids, maybe they start their homework. Before we nag them to start the homework, maybe we want to take a few breaths or let out a nice long silent sigh so we can say it as compassionately as possible. So ways of adapting mindfulness for young people, we can use the breath. We've talked about using the 5 senses, right? Noticing sounds, noticing sensations in our feet, right? Mindful eating, right? Noticing all the different flavors. We can use the imagination as an anchor. We opened, right? With that longer visualization, sitting like the mountain, breathing like the ocean, mind like the sky, and heart shining like the sun. We can also use kind of natural learning styles with kids. How do they already learn? They learn through play, right? One of my favorite studies was, about kids and being still, because kids, they don't love standing still often. This researcher named Lev Vygotsky did this experiment trying to get 8-year-olds to stand still. You probably know how this is going to end if you've ever spent time with 8-year-olds. So he gets them together. He says, okay, everyone, I want you to stand still as long as you can. Go. And what do you think happens? Right. So pretty quickly, right, the kids are running around all over the place in like 5 minutes. So he calls them back in. He says, okay, everybody, I want you to stand still as long as you can. This time, I want you to imagine that you're like a knight guarding a castle. And what do you think happens? So this time the kids are actually standing still for like 15 or 20 minutes. So just by like tapping into the power of our imagination, right, this actually, can help kids to stand still. That's why they said, walk like a ninja in the forest, listen like a deer, right? Because it taps into imagination. So play is incredibly powerful. Games, mindful or not, are a great self-regulation strategy. So I'm looking for my game slides. One thing I do is in my office, I was actually just with a kid yesterday, and we were playing Jenga, and I was saying, if you're taking the block out, do you notice, is your hand more steady on the in breath or on the out breath? Oh, this is gonna make me a better Jenga player, right? And then in my Jenga set at the office, I might have one in here. but you pull out a block, and on the block, it'll say something like, take 3 hot chocolate breaths, or name 3 sounds that you can hear. So it's just kind of built into the game that we're already playing. Candyland, which is like a game, basically designed to torture adults with boredom. It's like you can adapt this, right? Land on blue, talk about being sad or make a sad face. Land on red, talk about being mad, make a mad face. Land on purple, notice a sound, right? Land on orange, take a mindful breath. So it's just kind of integrated in. And as I said, Candyland's like a game that's designed to torture adults. My son a few years ago like really wanted Candyland, and I was like, I don't know, supply chain issues. I don't think the North Pole can get the parts, from what I hear. And so I came home one day, and he had made his own Candyland, and I was like, okay, right, now I've got to play with my son, right? Okay, fine. So he was so happy that we played Candyland. He'd made his own Candyland. And then I came home the next day, and he had actually, whoops, oh my gosh, I don't have it in here. He had made the board twice as big, right? Sorry, the slides are a little bit out of order. So, boredom is actually great for kids. It's really good for creativity. So games are great. Other games that we grew up playing are actually teaching really important self-regulation skills. Simon Says, Mother May I, red light, green light, that's teaching and practicing impulse control. Freeze tag and freeze dance, teaching self-regulation, going from movement to stillness. 20 questions and I Spy, that's teaching inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, theory of mind. Can I understand what someone else is thinking about in this moment? Right? Psychiatrist, charades, salad bowl, those kinds of games are teaching verbal fluency, nonverbal communication, understanding body language, reading body language, right? All these games are actually teaching kind of amazing and important things. And we used to call them, when I was growing up in the 80s, like time wasters, but actually they really are important for kids to be learning some of the skills that they need. Music is a great way to practice mindfulness. I'll say to kids, listen to like an angry song, a scary song, a sad song, a silly song, and just notice how your body feels, and then like come back and tell me about it. I'm like, oh, I listened to the angry song and my heart started to pound and my temperature went up. It's like, oh, well, that's what anger feels like in your body. I listened to the sad song and I felt heavy and I had a lump in my throat. So that's what sadness feels like. The more we can teach kids to recognize their emotions, that's really directly correlated with resilience, emotional intelligence, mental health outcomes. So these things, talking about emotions, teaching about emotions is really important. With teenagers, I'll sometimes say, oh, you probably don't want to focus on your breath for 5 minutes. That does sound boring if you're feeling upset or something, or can't focus, but put in your earbuds and just pick out your favorite song. And for the whole 5 minutes of that song, just listen to one instrument. Right? Listen to the piano. If your mind goes over to the guitar, just bring it back to the piano. And that's really soothing and grounding. And it's really, incredibly, helpful in terms of like, being a mindfulness practice. That's much more interesting than like, focus on your breath for 5 minutes, right? So listening to music a bit more mindfully. There's all kinds of arts and crafts. Actually, on my website, I got a bunch of arts and crafts downloads. Sports and mindfulness. The Olympics were last summer, just hearing so many athletes talk about breathing, talking about mental health, talking about mindfulness. Simone Biles, Djokovic, all these, amazing athletes, talking about mental fitness, mental resilience training, which is really just mindfulness. So, seeing that has been wonderful. Leo Messi, my son, loves soccer. I see some of you on the soccer fields around Cambridge and Somerville. But when he learned that Leo Messi practiced mindfulness, he was like, oh, this is great, right? Can we do mindfulness before my soccer game? Okay, so finding these ways to integrate it in. There's so many people practicing mindfulness as well that might be kind of fun, positive role models for our kids, pop stars, musicians, athletes, right? Other folks, Star Wars. We're really in a Star Wars phase of my house, but a lot of meditation, mindfulness kind of stuff in that. So there's a lot of ways we can think. You saw me kind of glaze over some slides about getting kids to buy in and get interested. Before bed, in our family, we have some different rituals. Sometimes we'll do a teddy bear breath, just put the teddy bear on your belly and just gently rock it to sleep, especially those weighted loveys and stuffies can be really wonderful for that. Superhero breaths, you can put your hands on your hips like Superman, breathe in and breathe out. Up and away. It's not exactly mindful, but it's definitely fun and gets kids to enjoy breathing. And the other thing I think that's really important for all of us when we are stressed out, when we are burned out, in our what's called our negativity bias, where we just perceive everything as bad and doom and gloom. Again, we're stressed out, right? We mostly perceive the negative. And so taking time for gratitude, which is linked to less anxiety and depression, better health, less aggression, more kindness, better sleep. So in our family, we do, at night, we usually do what's called roses and thorns. And we'll often do a couple of roses, things that went well that day. We had soccer practice outside. We got to have pizza for dinner. I got to have fun at recess with my friends, a few positives, and then a thorn, something maybe negative. Well, I had a lot of homework tonight. And then a bud for tomorrow. Like, what's one thing you're looking forward to? Oh, tomorrow got a baseball game, right? But we all do this in the family. It's not just the kids. My wife does it. I do it. Both kids do it. So we're all sharing. We're all connecting around some of the positive in our day. It also gives us something to look forward to, right? Anxiety is about looking to the future with a negative lens, or depression is looking at everything with kind of a negative lens. So if we take the time to say, what went well today? What are we looking forward to? It gives us something to look forward to. Also, these looking back, reviewing, and previewing kinds of exercises to do ourselves or with a family, even just when we're driving home from work, if we don't have a family, are actually really great because they help us organize our day, make sense of things, really good for what we call executive functions and kind of planning, not being overwhelmed. So gratitude is really important to practice for a number of different reasons. So we can find then these little moments in the day. This doesn't have to take that long, right? To just notice 3 sensations in our feet, or count 3 sounds, or take a moment to do 3 breaths, feeling our breath like the ocean, or standing up tall like a mountain. Maybe it's waiting for the elevator, or waiting to cross the street, or at that stoplight on Moss Ledge by the car wash, or right while we're waiting to pick the kids up in the car, or in the driveway before we walk in, or in the parking lot before we walk into work. Right? Or really anytime we feel the urge to just check out and start doom scrolling, that's a moment we can actually just pause and check in. So this doesn't have to be going off to a mountaintop or something like that. So I often close with this slide. It says, there's this guy at the coffee shop sitting at a table, not on a phone, not on a laptop, just drinking his coffee like a psychopath, right? And it's true, right? There's that one guy at the Dunkin' Donuts. But if we do just slow down and do one thing at a time, put our phone away, our laptop, just take a few moments to enjoy a meal, enjoy our coffee, listen to the sounds of the birds in the spring, smell the flowers, smell the coffee, things start to go a little bit differently for us. And then we're a little bit different when we approach whoever it is that we're caring about. We're more present, we're more open, we're more compassionate, we're more patient. And then our burnout is lessened, the conflict goes down, all of these things really start to change. So again, I want to thank Michael and Adrienne I want to thank all of you for being here, caring for yourself by putting on the oxygen mask, caring for the folks in your life who are struggling, and doing the best thing you can for everybody, which is just taking a few moments to offer yourself some self-care and some self-compassion. So thank you again, and I'll hang out if there's a couple questions.
So Chris, I was wondering, instead of a Q&A, do you mind if we just have a small discussion about mindfulness
Great.
and some stuff? Because it was great. Thank you so much. But you gave me thoughts while you were talking, and I'm like, so I wrote them all down. How can someone with a severe anxiety or depression start a mindfulness practice safely?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have some guidance if you've got a little trauma, if you've got a little depression or anxiety, or you feel at risk. I think that's where it's really useful to talk to your therapist if you have one, to practice with someone else, not on your own. Find a mindfulness practicing therapist, or if you do want to go, I work at CHA. There's a number of wonderful mindfulness groups, self-compassion groups that are offered there in person and online. They're often offered by people with a mental health background, through the Cambridge Hospital, Cambridge Health Alliance system. They also, if you're worried, they'll also chat with your therapist before you start the class to help you make a safety plan if you are a little bit nervous about some of the longer practices. Yeah.
Thank you. And, and speaking of which, I mean, I know mindfulness is actually in some therapies, like
Yes.
it's in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which actually CHA does. They have a whole department on that.
Yeah.
So I think it's great.
Yeah.
I love the acceptance and commitment therapy.
So good. Yeah.
I think it's so good. So that said, can mindfulness be contraindicated in some mental health symptoms?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, there's a lot of, I think, folks who are worried about, some folks with trauma, with anxiety, with bodily trauma, right? Things like that, kind of jumping right in with both feet, so to speak. To me, I think it's about adapting. So there's a kind of longer practice in some mindfulness courses called the body scan, where you spend about 45 minutes just closing your eyes, focusing on your body. Now, some people just don't feel safe doing that, understandably, if they've experienced bodily trauma or something bad happened when their eyes were closed, right? That certainly is logical. So that's not a great place to start. So I think, finding practices that are a little bit more sensory, feeling your feet on the ground, moving, walking meditation, eating meditation if eating isn't too loaded for some people. There's a lot of cultural baggage a lot of us have around food and eating, but that these things with like a good professional, whether it's a therapist or someone that's kind of a trauma informed mindfulness teacher, can be really helpful. I've got a little thing on my website about how to make mindfulness more trauma informed, and it's really just it's a lot of it's about common sense, but it's about giving people choice and making sure things feel consensual, and eyes can be open or closed, stop anytime. This isn't a nothing is mandatory. We're just going to kind of take it slow and see how it goes. Yeah. But the
Thank you.
same is true for folks with depression, with anxiety, or even people with ADHD who probably have a history of beating themselves up and feeling like, I can't do this, here I go again, why can't I pay attention, right? We all have that critical voice in different ways. So yeah.
I think part of that, and you addressed this a little bit, that part of that is, practicing meditation and being mindful, isn't something that comes natural for us. And when people are meditating, the reason they don't want to start is they're like, I can't sit on a mountain for 3 days, so people say even 10 minutes. I mean, so I started off, I put the goal of 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just do it, because then you grow instead of feeling like a failure.
Absolutely. I love how you put that. Yeah.
Thank you. So I did want to say about the growth mindset and fixed mindset. I used to, I always had a growth mindset, but there was a point in my life where I had to stop fighting myself on the things that I was dealing with.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like it was kind of a fixed mindset, but that fixed mindset gave me peace. It gave me peace in my life that I didn't have to feel like I had to keep putting myself out there and keep, pushing myself to do things that were so hard for me, which turned into a growth mindset, believe
Yeah.
it or not, because I was so able then at that point to be able to just, just be with who I am, be mindful, accepting of who I am, and say, this is really hard for me.
Yeah.
But that allowed me to then be able to hear what other people were saying and to deal with the things that I was dealing with. So I just kind of, that thought came to my head when you were talking about the growth mindset.
Well, Michael, what you're describing too is I think what a lot of us do, which is we pick up ways of thinking, ways of being in the world, often ways of behaving that keep us safe, right? There's certain things. If you keep a safe mindset, or if you keep a kind of fixed mindset of the world is dangerous when you're young because the world has been dangerous, it's going to keep you safe. Where it gets challenging is when the world then becomes less dangerous and we're still kind of in that fixed mindset of everything is dangerous, that there's something wrong with me. Sometimes it is easier or safer to blame ourselves than other people, but we eventually hopefully outgrow that and see, oh, I need to actually start to expand from this because the world is different and I'm different enough that I can handle it. And I think you're not alone. To me, that's often the process of therapy. That's often the process of healing, is breaking out of those old patterns, those old mindsets that, yes, once kept us safe. But they're no longer helpful to us. They're getting in the way of our work or our relationships or our happiness in these different ways. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. So before I go into my ending, is there anything else you wanted to say, or?
I'm just so grateful to be here. And again, as I said at the beginning, like being in kind of Cambridge, Somerville, Arlington, Medford, Boston area, it really does like warm my heart that there are, commissioners of mental health and, trying to bring more equity into our cities and to try to help more people who really need help, who are really struggling right now, especially in a time when I know so many people are worried about supports and funding and things like that. I'm just grateful that people like you and Adrian are out there, and that people watching are getting hopefully some support and ideas that they need to manage things for themselves and their families and the people that they're caring about and caring for.
Thank you, Chris. And I am very thankful for people like you. I actually, every time I listen to you speak, I learn something new about you. And I'm not sure I had ever heard, you were very open and vulnerable with your journey and what you experienced. And I think that's such a great role model to tell to people, because that is exactly what we want to do. You're not alone in what you're going through. I'm not alone in what I'm going through. There are so many people out there that need to hear these kinds of things. So your vulnerability, I really appreciated it. So I did want to say, I especially liked, because I always say one thing that I really liked. I liked the idea of the glimmers. I talk so many times about my triggers, but I don't talk about the things that I feel safe and give me accept. I mean, it was fantastic. Deb did, she came up with a great,
Such a
so
beautiful,
good,
helpful idea.
so helpful, so helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chris. Thank you all for being part of this deeply meaningful conversation today. As we close, I want to remind each of you that healing is not a solo journey. It's something we do better together. Whether you're here as a parent, a friend, a partner, a caregiver, or someone navigating your own mental health, your presence matters. You've taken a powerful step just by showing up, by listening, and by being willing to engage in this honest dialogue. Let's carry this spirit forward into our homes, our relationships, and our community. Let's keep making space for stories, for connection, and for compassion, because I know that healing is to be met with understanding instead of silence. Thank you again, and please take good care of yourselves and one another.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you, everyone.